Hey everybody, this is Barry Mankin here with the Holistic Home Health Podcast. We're here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we have a testimonial for you today. So this is a little bit of a unique situation to some. To others, it'll be very familiar. So we thought it was a wonderful story, and I want to introduce Wayne Price and say thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Yeah. I look forward to our dialogue, and we're just going to kind of go through our history of how we got to know each other and where we started and how we ended up. So
sure. Thank
welcome.
You. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So with that said, with what we do in this business, whether it's mold remediation or any other environmental concern in a house, we're looking for health. And a lot of times people are coming to us because there's a health issue. In this particular case, that's what we had. And so why don't you tell me what were your pain points that drew you to a problem in the house that you had? Tell us about the house. Tell us about what drew you to us in the first place.
Yeah, a loved one of ours lived in Washington, D.C., moved back here with health issues, having had long-term COVID and potentially Lyme disease. And as she was working through those health issues, mold came up as another concern, of which we found she had lived in elderly old apartments for about 8-9 years. So had a huge exposure to toxic molds, and found that to be almost a precursor to her journey to get well, is addressing that. So as that sensitivity came up, the home she was living in became a subject of review. And from that, we had thought we took some measures to mitigate it. And, subsequently, we had a whole different history of where we evolved to finish it. But initially, my prior history had offered me a lot in terms of industrial type settings and hospitals. And prior to COVID, the old things were, asbestos, lead, potentially in real sensitive areas. It could even be infection control in a hospital. So through all that, I had a headset of, imminent health barriers was a term that was used in the industry there, or encapsulations, another term, and method of mitigating sources from getting to people.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of that started with my headset. So we did encapsulation in a crawl space. This is a pier and beam house with about a 3-foot crawl space that was dirt at that time, with maybe some minor plastic over it. So we encapsulated it, and then I had talked to prior industrial hygienists that I had known who had helped me through issues, whether it was a flood or whatever we'd had. And they had recommended treating the mold with a spray, because it did have some topical mold there, because it was basically a open-aired crawl space. So the wood all had some growth on it, a little bit. So we did that, and so then she was on her recovery method or process with the people locally she's dealing with, and doing blood work, she found she was still being exposed to mold. And so that started us on another research project, if you will, to figure out what did we miss, how did we miss it. And so for me, it was getting experts who knew what I didn't know and drawing it out and together.
Let me ask you something with that real quick before we move forward with that, because this is really interesting to me. The process that you, if I hear you correctly, you had an investment property that was here for this loved one to live in.
Yes.
Moving from D.C. She already had some diagnosis prior?
Yes.
Okay, so she was aware of was it Sears or just different illnesses that were associated with chronic inflammatory response and that sort of thing.
Yes. And so she had started her recovery, but it wasn't progressing. And so then it was a question of, well, why? And so that came back to her environment.
Yeah, then environmental concerns come
up. And
it
was both environment, whether what you ingest, what you're exposed to and absorb, or rest, just all of it to where her system would respond properly. And so when we did a review of what I had done prior to mitigate what I thought was a source that could have hurt her. We just found that not adequate enough. And so that's when I started reaching out further and trying to figure out in the industry who's doing what.
Yeah.
How do we do it? Where did I not do enough initially? And so ultimately what I wanted, though, was to have a party like yourself not invested in doing the work, but invested in the solution and the validation that we got it and did it right. And so that way there wasn't the fox in the hen house.
Yeah, that conflict of interest comes up a lot.
And I think in this industry, I think you have to be careful of that.
Yeah.
And we had, so I interviewed multiple contractors and just tried to learn what I wanted, I thought I needed, or what I needed. And then I also asked them for a person like yourself because I wanted to find a hygienist that was professionally capable of dealing with this. And the guys I knew from my old days didn't do this. It was an area they didn't, but they did other things, but not this.
Right.
So they said, yeah, you're wise to get a third party who could help gatekeep what's going on and measure the outcomes. So, that was or both, even baseline and outcomes, after process.
Exactly.
So you had to have both. And so your name was offered amongst 2 or 3 others in the industry here locally. And
There's not many of us here.
No, and it tends to be that way in a lot of cities, whether it's this or in industrial settings too. There's, not that many. But actually I called you and interviewed you kind of at first and thought, okay, this works. And I had interviewed a bunch of contractors as well. And I think it was, and I'm used to doing a lot of general contracting work. So it was mine to kind of put the people together so that I thought we'd have a team that would work. And so that's how we started. I think at the time you didn't even know the contractor that I'd kind of chosen by choice by interviewing.
Yeah, I think there was a timeline issue, right? Because
it was.
Because we always say the good people are busy.
Right, and it was true.
Yeah, and we'll do referrals sometimes as well. But I think the people that even we recommended were like
way
months
out.
And
more than months. And,
there's a reason.
Yeah,
right?
and they're good. Yeah.
But to your credit, you found somebody that you thought might work, and we started, I think, a process where we did the diagnostic on the front end, and we wanted to get a baseline assessment.
Yeah.
And then due to her ailments there that we had, we also had discussed mycotoxins as far as doing a mycotoxin test, just to kind of see where we were at with that.
Yeah.
And then you had given me a history, which, the crawl space was apparently the biggest issue that we had initially found.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think at that time we did like a moisture mapping of the exterior walls or anything like that.
No, but I did have the contractors use infrared, and in fact, I had done that even prior on the first effort I did. I did an infrared scan on it so I could find out if I had weaknesses above the crawl space.
How old's the house? I know it's an older home, but I can't remember.
55, 60 years old.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah, and
so there's lots of holes.
and so there was things like, gutters, making sure your integrity of your wall system outside, windows, all that.
All of it, yeah.
Roof, so those things all I had to do too, and clean up because it had been rental property before. And when you're not living in it, some people just tolerate more than I would. And I was surprised by some of the things I found that could contribute to this issue. And so those all had to be mitigated to even start the project. We had to kind of eliminate potential sources. All it does is reoccur. You're just going to start over. And
correct.
So that was the headset I had about it. And so I was grateful for everybody's efforts. I guess as you alluded to, we started and thought we had a good process. It turned out to have some problems, and it created another issue for us that we had to resolve. And so there was, and I think one of the things that is a hard assumption by most people is when you have a crawl space and then you have your first floor, finished floor, it's hard for people to envision that there could be contamination from below up. And so it can look like, oh, it can't possibly happen, but it can.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when people are sensitized and they have no tolerance for this stuff.
Right.
And that's just exacerbated that much more.
Yeah.
Because it's available.
Well, and you take somebody, especially after COVID, that has any kind of a health impairment.
Yeah.
You're adding a time-related exposure to something that's going to hurt them in a contributory way to their current health.
Yeah, if they're immune compromised, if they've already sensitized, whatever the case is, the more, it's just like anything else. You have dosage,
right?
And time goes to that. So it's concentration level and time, right?
Yeah.
Of any contaminant, all the things that are available down there. I mean, we've got varmints that are down there, and they're what they leave behind. The poison that in a lot of cases that's down there to affect the biologicals, and at the same time will affect the people in the house if they have any of that dust gets in the air. The microbials, the bacteria, so many things that are associated with that crawl space. And then we have an older home that has penetrations throughout the floor. And then we button things up for energy efficiency on the outside, and that stack effect increases.
Cooks it,
and it creates more pressure. So now you get, and that's if you don't have, that's just normal. That's without any, water damage issues or anything like that, which we found on the initial inspection. I think we found some areas that had some water damage.
Right.
We found just typical mold that we see in Tennessee at a certain level on several of the joists, where we had localized areas from water damage, and then we had all kinds of growth on the substrate and on the ductwork from just time, because every summer, we raise up, we grow things, and then in the winter it gets dormant. Usually that's how that works from that high relative humidity. Then the vapor barrier itself was, not the greatest.
It wasn't a full vapor. It was plastic, if you will, over the dirt, but it wasn't over the walls or up the walls.
Sealed. It wasn't sealed or anything.
And you have a, block foundation which has some porosity to it. So
correct.
So there's all those were contributors, and I guess when you start to have a problem, you look at the environment of it and try to figure out. How do you mitigate it? My old adage was, it's like a chain link. If you remove the links, then the outcomes change and prevented. And so we had a bunch of links we had to take care of.
Absolutely.
And so I would say whoever, I'm an old property guy. And so the one thing was, I know everybody doesn't understand, but preventative maintenance is really essential before you can get to this issue.
Right. If
you're taking care of your roof, your environment, your walls, your windows, internally, you need to know if you got water leaking, don't let it sit there and kind of propagate, because it's going to cause all kinds of issues.
It doesn't just go away.
No,
that's what people think. Oh, the leak stopped, or I can't see it anymore.
Yeah, and so so awareness of those kind of issues, and then continuing awareness of it, allows, once you've mitigated it through what we did, it should never reoccur.
Yeah, awareness is a good word to use. We talk about that a lot on the podcast. Yeah. And I think you and I spoke a little bit before this, and we talked about the awareness of buyers even in the industry, where they'll be coming to a new community and they are now more either sensitized or they're fearful, or they know somebody that's been immune compromised or had an effect from an environmental situation, and they come into a house and they're keenly aware of the potentials, maybe not all of them, but especially when you come to a moist climate like Tennessee, we have mold here. It's prevalent.
You're not going to get it. I mean, there's, in the natural environment, it exists.
Correct.
And so, and I think secondly, your awareness is up on it. Inspectors now will take moisture meter readings around windows. They'll take infrared scans. And those are good, sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, like an idiot light on a car. I call it that.
It's another diagnostic.
It gives you another and it says, oh, my antenna's up. This may need further investigation. I don't think they're going to discover the magnitude or root cause of it in that inspection, but at least says this needs further review. And in some cases, then it's for buyers. I think they just, it is a very solvable issue.
Right.
But, you know, and I do get concerned that some people might build it out of proportion. You know, I think it's very controllable and curable. There is the right way to do it. And I think in the industry, those standards are starting to get set. You know, it's like we've talked before. It's not as honed out as, say, asbestos is in some ways, or even lead. But
that's all regulated stuff.
This one's still kind of coalescing, and so, you know, I think the industry is moving in the right direction, because a lot of things you gave me to look at made me feel better that there's some really good best practices and advocated ways by which to deal with this. I kind of had to look at that when I was when I thought we had to do the second run. How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? And so I just tried to. And there was a little bit of just having belief and faith in the people that were going to do it, that was their best efforts, and if it didn't work, we were going to do something else. and so as this situation happened, and,
we actually we didn't find too much initially, and this is where it comes into, and we see this a lot. You know, every level of testing that we do has its advantages and has its limitations.
Right.
And so as long as we set that out there, which we always say, set that expectation really well, so that people know what they're getting for their money. And, you know, just to see if there's something obvious in the air, we would do some air quality testing, a grade investigation. We looked around. We didn't do moisture mapping necessarily, I think, at that time.
Right.
But we did do we checked the windows for moisture. We check the sinks, things like that, for history, etc. We look at the ductwork for air quality. So we kind of checked all those boxes. And really, overall, I think we had a couple of rooms that we needed to address that were some indicators maybe for some things, which we associated with the kitchen, which we found that we had some water damage there. And then the ductwork was pretty dirty. And then some of it was in bad shape down below. We had some compromised lines in the crawl space. So that was pretty much it. We had a little bit of history, I think, from the master bathroom that had been remodeled, but there was evidence that there was some water history there. So we just kind of noted those things and got a plan for remediation for inside the house and for the crawl space. All her stuff is in there. She's living in there, right? And she wasn't feeling well.
Well, we moved her out temporarily while we did all this work because we wanted to protect her. And,
Correct.
And we were just being cautious. And, you know, I'm not saying she couldn't have lived there, but it certainly was, we had the means to let her live somewhere else.
Yeah, great.
You know, and that just left it dormant with nobody coming in and out, so we didn't have to worry about anything new introduced. It made it easy for us to a degree, but we were also wanting to be timely to, you know, finish this issue and not let it propagate, you know, or just.
So let's talk about the remediation process and what happened, because we always say to know you have a good mediator, other than making sure that they're insured and making sure they have the qualifications, that they're certified in what they're doing. It's product, process, and people is what we always say. And there's a little bit of variation on how different guys approach things, but the general principles and the standards of practice are usually the same as it relates to remediation. We always refer to the IICRCS 520 guidelines, which is a minimum standard. So it's kind of like HVAC. Whenever they put HVAC in your house, it's the minimum standard. So it's not performance. So when we're remediating, we have to have some sort of thing that everybody agrees on. But that how that process works is everything. And every house is a little bit different. But those minimum standards are there as a threshold to say, okay, we can't see certain things here. Right. And we don't get into mycotoxins. We don't, at least with the IICRC. But all that awareness is coming up. We had on our sampling, we had some areas of concern, like I said. We also had some high mycotoxins in certain areas. Not across the board, but I think there were a couple of specific ones, and they were related to water damage, molds, which was an indicator to say, okay, we've got history here. So whether that was directly associated just what was coming up from the crawl space or the kitchen, we weren't entirely sure yet.
Well, and it was... be quite honest, it wasn't even very evident because unless you had her sensitivity to a degree in the testing we did, because it was literally behind fixed casework, and somewhat into the subflooring.
Correct.
You don't go looking for that or finding it in a visual inspection, and even we had to go much more deeper to figure it out.
Absolutely.
And so we were just committed to finding it and removing it, because it doesn't go away if you don't.
Yeah.
To a degree. And so, again, I think one of the big things for me was the ductwork penetrations. I think a lot of people may take those for granted. There's a boot, typically metal boot, that goes from either some space, attic or crawl space, could be even in a wall, but they'll typically go from something flex to a formed metal type, fitting that you can put a diffuser on. That's how you get your air transfer through. But what happens is, I think a lot of people are underestimating how to seal those.
Yeah.
So that you don't have cross communication from a non-living area to a living area.
Yep.
And so, that's something that I think in new construction or any other construction ought to be paid closer attention to.
Oh, absolutely. Anymore, that's part of code whenever they're.
Yeah.
But I mean, that presents other problems as well.
Right.
But the houses are definitely tighter.
Yeah.
And every penetration point, whether that's a jack stud, the seam, or where it meets the sheathing, or any utilities coming through that wall or floor,
right,
everything is sealed
right.
anymore. And when we get into a 50-year-old house,
it wasn't.
It's just
it just wasn't.
Yeah, and then you get Tennessee moisture on top of it coming through, much less the crawl space aspect. And so that stack effect really is dramatic on what's available down there, number one.
Yeah.
And then whatever's available, we always say 50% roughly of your air that you breathe comes from your crawl space, unless
you
keep it down there.
Yeah. And so there was, for us too, part of the process was, we had the right filtration, for the air handling unit. Mm-hmm. And it, again, as you mentioned, we ended up renewing all the flexible ducts. I just decided it was not worth cleaning, repairing. We just renewed them.
Yeah, we had enough damage down there.
There was enough, and plus the cleaning may have done some of it. We weren't even sure. Mm-hmm. It was a combination that made it a no-brainer to just let's renew it. I didn't want to take chances, and I thought, why are you going to do all this work and then leave some little element to further your problem?
Sure.
And so we just said, we're done. We're going to do that.
Tell me about once we got our assessment, we got our baseline, and this is like literally just the basic, other than mycotoxins, the kind of the basic level that we're looking for. We talked about general air quality issues and that there's levels of this. We discussed that, but just to kind of get started, we knew we had enough to get started with. At some point, it's like, okay, we need some action items. We're going to deal with that kitchen. We're going to deal with that crawl space.
Yeah.
You find a company in town. You did your vetting process. Tell me, how did you feel about? Did you have a good feel through your interview process with them on the front end?
Well, yeah, and part of it was obviously availability, because our time was important. 2 was this, what were they going to do, their history, and then 3, even the ones who weren't available, I got to interview so I could ask them about, best practices.
Yeah, so you're throwing at the guy that wasn't available and asking him those.
Yeah, and I've done tons of contracting, and so I've always had a feel for find somebody who's hungry. I have no problem with somebody who's new. Yeah. Because I don't mind working with people and we grow together type thing. I was always that way. And so I had a comfort level and a commitment that we would get this job done. I think the party we ended up selecting had a growing curve that caused us some issues. But, again, at the end of the day, I think character stands hard and good in this industry, and they were very reputable people that I would use again, type thing. So in the beginning, it was availability, time, talent, and sort of commitment, and I felt like we'd hit enough of all those to make a start, and go for it, and we had you on board, and I think even initially, their process wasn't what you'd recommended, and so we said, well, let's try it and see if it works. Well, it didn't. It failed. And so, it caused a little bit further contamination in the house. Fortunately, my daughter wasn't living in it. Right. So at that juncture, it looked worse than it did before we started. And so I think we just had to kind of all get together. I remember the meeting in the house, and they were, I think at first, didn't believe the results that the test indicated. There was a little bit of shock, deer in headlights. And but they never started to blame or deny, neither did I. I just said, I think this is the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think we were able to prove it, that they had failed to do some isolation that they should have done, that we had warned repeatedly about. Yeah. They thought they had it, and they just didn't. And so some of that I would say was their quality control more than that they weren't aware. Sure. I think they had people who didn't perform to the level they should have, and they were entrusted with doing things. So that allowed for the first process to fail.
Let's talk about that too. Yeah. Let's kind of break that down a little bit. Whenever we talk about getting the right people for a job, time was a big issue. Reputation, I think, was there. You actually spoke with them, mm-hmm. and I think they talked enough of the game that it gave you enough confidence. If I remember correctly, I was aware of who that was. And history-wise, I didn't have a good relationship. We usually like working with people that promotes third-party testing, promotes best practices. Yeah. And historically, at least, we hadn't had any kind of good history, at least with them. Yeah. And so, but there was somebody new that had taken up that torch apparently during this process. A new party had just acquired that firm. Yeah. And so the one thing that I felt was essential was they weren't going to prove their own work. We were going to use you as a third party. And they agreed contractually that, no, we would stand by a third party testing, mm-hmm. so that, that there's no way you do it. The own party does their own test, and you just have to question that. Yeah. So, so they agreed to that, and so when we got to this point where we had a problem, and they started in the crawl, right? That's where it started. They actually, or did they work on the kitchen first? They were in the kitchen. Okay. And what caused that cross-contamination was they left the kitchen in neg air, and then went into the crawl. Yeah. And that's where they pulled it right up and in. Yeah, so negative air for you kids at home, that's when you're creating negative pressure in the house, and you're actually, during a demo process, whenever you're removing materials, you're spreading all kinds of particulate everywhere. So that construction debris is very dusty. Whatever's on that dust, whatever microbial is in the air separate from that or on it, all of that, the idea is you have a scrubber in that room inside of containment for the area that you're working in. Mm-hmm. You're getting some makeup air. You'll put in basically a filter on that plastic for the air to draw from the home, and in some cases possibly outside, depending on the situation. Yeah. But you'll suck all that debris. Other than having that filter, you suck that outside so that your load doesn't build up in the house, right? So they do that in the kitchen. Then they go to the crawl space. Well, all these penetrations are in the floor. Well, they still leave this on. Yeah, and some of them, again, the house is 50, 60 years old, right, and had been renovated multiple times. As you find out later, there was old penetrations. Oh, yeah, throughout the whole flooring system. Yeah, that kind of worked their way up through penetrations that allow breathing. So if you put it in neg air, you're going to try to, you're pulling it up. Yeah. And so that's what happened. Yeah. And so it was one of those moments where you'd came in, their post-testing did not pass. In fact, it almost had gotten worse. It had. Quite a bit worse. Yeah. So you weren't present, but I had a meeting with them, and we shared the results. It took them a day or so to breathe through it and kind of, agree that, we had a problem. Mm-hmm. And in that day period, I guess, when we met, I'd actually found some sources where the leaks were. Oh, sure. And so they were, kind of brought to, the facts and didn't shirk from it. And we were very professional. There was no yelling. There was, no animosity. It was like, you're the team. Mm-hmm. We need to fix this.
And so I really encouraged them to go back and look at what you had said to do versus what they had done. And I said, I'm going to strongly recommend you guys do this. You're liable for it. And I would strongly recommend we think about who and what we've done and figure out how to do it better.
Yeah.
And so they did. They got right back into it like they'd started over. And so everything from the barriers we needed to the containment with all the holes and the different means of where contamination could occur, mitigated all that, got it tight, and then they went back through the process in the crawl first this time and got all that sourced out.
Yeah.
And you tested it.
Yeah.
And it passed.
Yeah.
So we knew we had no contamination down below. So then we had to come back up.
Let's talk about that process too, and kind of open that up a little bit more.
Sure.
Because we're going to have a second, basically episode to this story, and we're going to talk about all the good things that happened, which is not normal in a case like this. So this is one of the reasons where I really, other than just the fact that everything went well, but this is a unique story that does not happen in this industry often, and it's a testament to your integrity and basically your countenance, because most people that I see, whenever they have a problem, because I came in and I didn't even, I took I think a few samples just to prove that the microbial was there. But when I came in, the air was thick.
Yeah.
I saw dust on everything in the house and areas that weren't contaminated before. And my particulate counter was beeping at me.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to talk to you. You're supposed to just get the quantitative data. But it was going crazy, and that was throughout the whole house, inside and outside of containment. So we had a problem.
I had went in the house before you got there, the day before. I called them and I said, man, I don't understand. I said, this house I feel like I'm walking through dust.
It doesn't feel right.
It didn't feel right. And I don't think it was late, so I don't think they were able to get over there before you got there the next day. And I think at that point, a lot of it had settled to a degree. You could, like we met in there and it was settled. And again, I don't really have a health impairment. We sat there and were perfectly fine. So I don't want to scare people. We weren't, I didn't feel threatened, but I didn't want my daughter in there.
Well, you also didn't want any
loved one.
You didn't want to stay there for any length of time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no.
So we had, not only was there scope of work to deal with the remediation, because they had actually said that they were going to do a fine particle clean for the mycotoxins that we found on the front end.
Right.
So they're from what I understood, that job was not only for the mold, which is the IICRC, and let's pass a PRV,
right,
post-remediation verification, but we also went in there and did a mycotoxin sample as well. And I knew it wasn't going just for the amount of debris, but we had to prove the point to say, okay. And our mycotoxins, not only was the mold now everywhere. Right. We had titanium in locations that were beautiful before and had no problem. And it was in every location in the house and in the air and on surfaces. Yeah. So, which I normally wouldn't redo a baseline, but when we saw that contamination, I was like, okay, now we've contaminated the whole house. Yeah. And your stuff. Yeah. That's a big deal for a lot of people. And how we handle that, again, is a testament to this process and how it can get better. Yeah. So we had that. Our mycotoxins also, we saw other mycotoxins that were related and way higher than what we had before. So it was, the whole house got contaminated from this process down below.
Yeah, they accepted it.
And they took it. Exactly. Yeah.
And we just regrouped and they, to their credit, they came up with a aggressive plan. Yeah. And we went sort of section by section, crawl first and then up. Yeah. And then we kind of had to up the living area in 3 quadrants, if you will. Yeah. And they just kind of clockwise went around, and
we had a good plan.
Yeah. And you know, you'd like to see those efforts not occur because you did things on the front end better, you know, at that. And I think to their credit, as I've talked with them, they've changed their operating procedures. They've gotten different people. They've tightened up on how to mitigate these things. And so it took some time. We are very comfortable with the outcome. You know, for her especially, or my loved one, and they've been in the house now for couple months, and we have nothing to show that there's a problem. There is, and we should probably talk post this kind of effort for somebody who has a concern. There's preventive maintenance on the outside and the inside. Gotcha. There's also some preventative things that just in the way you clean, the way you filtrate your air.
Yeah. Let's talk about that in the next episode.
Sure.
Here, because I want to give all the good things.
Sure.
And talk about that process and how we got there, and then talk about these prevention methods, because I think we've really laid out, built this tension up, for people that are in some cases all too familiar on how bad it can get.
Right.
Because you're not the only one that I've dealt with this, with other companies as well, where they go in, they disturb, they don't have the proper isolation, and they contaminate the whole house, and it becomes things turn into litigation, and it gets nasty.
Well, you can make it worse, and then you ultimately don't accomplish what you needed to, which was to mitigate a problem. You made it bigger and worse.
And that's the attitude, folks, that I want to highlight, to say, hey, if you can keep the temperature level-headed, yes, it's more time, and yes, it's more money, but overall, that's one thing that I appreciated about your process with this, Wayne, is that you had choices to make, and I have no dog in the fight.
Right.
All I was going to do is say, hey, you've got a problem.
Right.
And it's worse, and it's much worse.
Yeah.
Now, what are we going to do about it? And it's either, do we wait for another guy to come in there and then make them liable or whatever? Does it go to insurance? Does it go to litigation? You had so many options, and for your level head and your grace is what I should say, for the people involved, it allowed you to get to this point. So we'll leave that as a teaser for the next episode. But again, I want to thank you so much for coming today.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for the
guys,
time.
it can get better. You just got to go through a process here, but the process will work. So let's get the good news on the second episode, okay? Thanks for watching.